This Recruitment Leaders Unlocked podcast will feature Craig Davies, who is the CEO of Orbis Group. And Craig talks so eloquently about lots of different things, but some of the highlights to listen out for. The impact that reading a book about the All Blacks has had on the leadership style that Craig uses and the culture within the organisation. Craig talks about how trust is vital as you scale your business, on how much is placed on the importance of being decisive, making decisions when you need to make them, not holding back too much. How, as the business grew, they realized they needed a better structure in order to scale. And then what they're focusing on now as they go from a £28 million business with 50 staff to an even bigger business. So there's a lot of gems, there's a lot of good stuff to listen to. So please join me. I'm listening to Craig Davies of Orbis on Recruitment Leaders Unlocked. Welcome to this next episode of the Jump Recruitment Leaders podcast, Recruitment Leaders Unlocked. And our guest today is Craig Davies, who is the CEO of Orbis Group. Craig, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the company?
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Dave. Glad to be here. So Craig Davies, co-founder, CEO of what is now the Orbis Group. A global talent solutions partner, 3 core service offerings across contingent recruitment, contract perm, exec search and consultancy. Core markets are tech, financial services, life sciences. We've got our global HQ, which I'm sitting in right now, which is in a WeWork in St. Catherine's Dock. US HQ is in Austin. And we're partnering with customers across UK, US, Europe and into the Middle East. We're founded just over 10 years ago, very much evolved from that contingent into that kind of solutions-based proposition now, across those different core areas. So, 50 heads. I guess we can talk a little bit about how that's changed over recent years as we work through.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to the story because you've been on a journey, which is, a lot of these podcasts that you see people do, everybody talks about the journey they've been on. And as in with so much of recruitment, the journey for each individual person running a business and each individual company is quite fascinating. So the focus today is on leadership and leadership through that journey. So I'll kick off with the first question, Craig. What leadership principles have been the foundation of your success? And as your business has grown over the 10 years, how have they evolved?
Yeah, I guess it's always been leading from a position of trust from day one. I know people have different views on that. Pre-Orbis, or as long as I can remember, I always feel as though that's something that I've kind of had and offered up front, if you like. I don't see that needs to change. But I do think it sets a clear tone that you've got my trust, and it's a two-way process, right? And I think like a journey is a good way to put it. And there's all these different journeys, right? Micro journeys, big journeys. And this one's been over 10 years, obviously, so far, as I said. And at the beginning, a lot of it is just leading through action, I think. In terms of how you do the job day to day, how you turn up, how you work with your colleagues, your clients, your candidates. And then obviously over time, that's needed to evolve into a more structured way of leading. That's taken time, right? Like when you start off, you're going through that, your own personal journey, and you're trying to learn how you want to do the job, how you want to run your company. And the reality is at the beginning is we didn't really do a lot different. Like we were just doing it for ourselves, and you just had that added pressure and kind of process around what it is to actually run a business. I think it's evolved over the years, and we've got a clear purpose, a clear mission, values that are very much like behaviours, not just words. We've got that reinforced with a leadership charter, which we all kind of are supposed to live and die by. And I think that's important. I think it's important that we start and finish with those different principles with everything that we do. So that's now fundamental to the different things that we do within the business, whether that's the hiring process with interviewing people, performance management, the way we engage with each other, with like candidates and clients again. We've always had a very kind of customer client centric approach. And that again starts with solid partnerships, solid commitments. But again, it's a two-way process, right? Like a partnership is very much that. It's not like you're subservient to a client. So, I think there's certain fundamentals without overcomplicating it, which is like I would never ask someone to do something that I wouldn't do. There's that book by James Kirk called Legacy.
Yeah.
It's quite well known. It's basic, like for people that don't know, it's based around the All Blacks and the high performance culture, and ultimately what underpins that culture is them sweeping the changing rooms after every match, right? So you leave it in a good condition. You don't rely on somebody else to do it. It doesn't matter how good you are, how much you're getting paid, anything like that. So I think when you're driving a higher performance culture, it always starts with the basic fundamentals, like do them well, do them consistently. And I think that's a pretty good starting point.
And have they been more challenging to hold on to those as you grow and as the company's evolved over the 10 years? I guess the All Blacks, they probably still sweep the change rooms. They still do that. That's still part of it's in their DNA, isn't it? So
I think
is that true for you guys as well?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I think I genuinely, obviously, it's not efficient for you to do absolutely everything as your role becomes a bit bigger and you've got other responsibilities, right? Because the responsibility is ultimately making the right decisions and leading by example, and that can come in all sorts of different guises, whether it's dropping down and doing stuff like that or making the big decisions that are going to shape the direction of the business over the next few years. So yeah, I guess in answer to the question, no, it hasn't changed from a fundamental perspective. I feel like maybe when times are a bit busy or a bit crazy, you might lose sight of those things if you're honest with yourself. And you need to check yourself, but also try and make sure you surround yourself with people that are going to check you too.
Yeah,
to make sure we're staying honest to what we believe in and how we want our kind of culture and our environment to be.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. That's helpful. What about Craig, when things backfire? What about when your leadership approach that's kind of in your DNA? What about when it backfires? What did you learn from those experiences, and how did that help shape sort of future decisions?
There's quite a few mistakes that you make, obviously, but firstly, you need to create an environment where people feel comfortable making a mistake. I think like you want to encourage people to fail a little bit. It's a bit cliche, but it's not necessarily easy to actually have that environment to make people genuinely feel that they can do that.
Yeah.
I think as leaders and business owners and founders, like there's an element of risk appetite, obviously, but that needs to be measured. And sometimes maybe you even need to get people in to try and suppress that risk appetite a little bit to make sure that you're not kind of taking too much risk. But I think like we talked about trust a minute ago, and I think maybe at times you can allow that trust to go too far. I mentioned that book a minute ago, Legacy. It's been quite important for us on the journey we've been on. I think you find these little things that you kind of hook onto that really resonate, and that's been one of them. And one of the other things in the book is that doesn't matter how good you are. Like, it doesn't matter how good a player you are, how good a recruiter you are, how good you are at marketing, compliance, anything. There's a zero tolerance policy to anyone that doesn't demonstrate the values. Their reference is a no dickheads policy. So that has kind of become our kind of fourth unofficial value. That was a few years back. So we even got it printed on like a canvas when we got a load made up with our values and stuff. And it's a bit tongue in cheek, but I mean, fundamentally it isn't, because
everybody knows what that means.
Yeah. And I think coming back to your question, I don't think you can overstate the damage of keeping hold of the wrong people. It obviously doesn't mean that they're dickheads, and there's very few people that you meet that are. It happens from time to time, but more likely is that you find yourself in a situation that you've either hired the wrong person or the wrong person is in the wrong role, and you need to be decisive, right? Whether that's come from a mistake or the fact that the business has changed and evolved, the need is going to change over time, and people will either change with that or they won't. And that comes down to two things. One, whether they've got the capability, and two, whether they want to. So and that they can be really tough decisions. But you've got to be honest with yourself in terms of whether or not it's the right thing for that individual and whether it's what the business needs. But yeah, fundamentally, I think there's an element of trusting your gut sometimes. And if something doesn't feel right, probably isn't. So in answer to the question, I guess broadly around people decisions and trying to make sure you're making the right decisions and being decisive with any changes.
And did you ever find yourself going something along the lines of, remember when we did that and this is what happened, we've got to make sure we don't do it again now? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And there's been quite a lot of examples of that over the last, prior to the last maybe 5-6 months, quite a lot of examples of that over the last couple of years.
Right.
And it's a bit cliche, but that's where you learn.
And it's people, isn't it? It's mostly people.
Yeah. But it's also those difficult situations, as you know, like where you learn most about yourself and the people around you and your business and like your customers and your clients. And does that answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. The next question. I always smile when I was writing the question as well. That recruitment is, a fast-paced, high-pressure industry.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you then go to a hospital with your kid or your family or whatever, and you think it's not really. There are people out there that do proper high pressure, life on the line type stuff. But for us in recruitment, we are always running at 100 miles an hour. It seems like that. So how do you balance the performance while maintaining a kind of strong, engaged company culture?
I think it's a tough balance, obviously.
And
I think it's one that you can't just find an answer and that's okay. You tick that box and move on. It's just a constant thing that you need to revisit and try and kind of reset and evolve. But I do feel like if you set a clear expectation from the start, then you have a better chance of managing that balance and the chances of success to try for the type of culture that you want. We've obviously got, well, not obviously, but we do have loads of really good benefits and good flexibility, great commission scheme, good salaries, etc. But your starting point should be wanting to be in this industry and having a clear view of what it takes to be successful. It's a tough job, right? As you said. Yeah. So you've got to be committed to laying the foundations to build that success. Like I've done it, you've done it. Lots of people listening to this will have done it. It's easy to get drawn into the potential, but you need to really kind of, I think, put the effort in up front to setting the expectation with people, because you can give people a framework, but they're the ones that have got to show up with the right mindset. And I think it's interesting what you said a minute ago about hospitals, because you've got the challenge versus threat state, right? And you want people to be in a challenge state all the time because you want to be, it's fairly widely acknowledged, you want to be better at what you do. So you want to be encouraged, you want to be surrounded by people that are just want to get that little bit better every day. Clearly it's not always a threat state, right? Like it is if you work in a hospital. So it's a good analogy. I think it would be impossible to be in such a high pressure job, even if it is just a sales job, if you're never in a threat state, because there are targets, there is a lot of pressure. And I don't think it's such a terrible thing to tip into that from time to time, provided that isn't what you're encouraging and or the environment that you want all the time. And there are obviously a lot of companies in every sector that maybe do want that. But I think living in that challenge state is kind of like where you want to be.
Yeah. Do you get asked, Craig, just a question on the culture bit, do you get asked to interview people coming to your company? Do they say, what's the culture like at Orbis? Do they ask that question? Because obviously money's important and job satisfaction, all of that. Do they ask about the culture?
Yeah. Sometimes it feels like a bit of a stock question. You know, like people need to ask the questions. And I'm a big fan of asking questions for sure. I think what I've learned over time is that a lot of people want clarity, like clarity around expectation, like what is the job that I'm doing and how am I going to be measured?
Yeah.
And I definitely haven't done that well enough in the past. Like you bring somebody into a job and you think it's enough that they can come and figure it out. I think you need that joint agreement that this is what the role is. This is the expectation. And then you've got clarity and then you're going to measure people against that. And ultimately, if people know what their job is, how they're being measured, then they should be allowed a certain amount of autonomy to go away and get it done. So we'll give people the support to get there. And I also want to give them the space to make the right decisions, right? Or like I said a minute ago, maybe the wrong ones.
Yeah.
So
they've got the space.
Yeah. I mean, I don't use this actually if people ask me in interviews, but I've always liked the quote: "The culture is the worst of the behaviour you accept." And I also like it because I don't think that solely falls on me. Like I can set an expectation of what I believe and what the vision is, but the culture comes from within. So it isn't just on me if somebody's doing something they shouldn't be doing or isn't. And when I say what they shouldn't be doing, it's not telling them off or turning up late. For me, it's more the qualitative side of the job. Like, don't drop your expectations of how you do things and how you engage with people. Hold each other to account. Let's make sure we've got high standards. And I think if we all manage that culture together and we all look after it, that gives us the best chance possible of making sure it stays there. And no one's perfect, right? I think you need to be willing to have those uncomfortable conversations as well, right? Which
is part of leadership, isn't it? That's the leadership thing, is those uncomfortable conversations that you must have, that often we avoid putting off for too long and then wish we had it months ago or weeks ago. Yeah,
exactly. And I think sometimes people can build things up and sometimes it's just good to bite the bullet, right? And you might not necessarily, from my experience, everybody's very different, but you might not necessarily get the reaction that you want at the time. But most of the time, within a few days or another few conversations, it gets to where it needs to get to because you're doing it for the right reason.
Yeah.
You're being fair and you're being reasonable. And is it even more so if you've set a clear expectation from the start?
Yeah. So what, Craig, what's been the biggest leadership challenge that you faced as you've scaled Orbis, and how did you overcome it?
Recovering from the success of 21-22. We had a pretty reasonable 2020 in the end. Felt pretty good after that initial uncertainty when COVID was kicking off. Hopefully reinforced the fact that we had a good team, good clients, a good business overall. So that kind of saw us through. And we were 30 odd people at that time. Yeah. And we were getting towards the end of 2020 and we could see the market was turning a bit already. And we took a decision to try and get ahead of the market a little bit, actually, and see if we could line up some new hires to come in Q1 21. And that worked. Obviously, the market went absolutely nuts and that felt like a good decision at the time. And we just carried on hiring. So we didn't really change the way that we did the job, but we just kept on hiring people into the business. And we saw a lot of success. Like over that period, as a lot of people did, right? So coming out the back of COVID, 21, 22, as crazy as they were brilliant years. The leadership challenge came when the market started to contract. So by the time that happened, back end of, what was it, 22?
Yes.
We're over.
It got a bit wobbly, didn't they? People were a bit more uncertainty.
Yeah, exactly. You could see it coming. And then, so we tripled in size by then, opened new offices, over 100 people. And then it was a case of, okay, we're not doing as much business as we need to be doing to sustain this size of team. There's a lot of underperformance. So, yeah, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people over the last few years about how this has played out for them, and this is a fairly consistent story. So back end of, through 23, really, we were having to kind of right size. So we're still doing deals, we're still doing business, we've still got a contract book, but it's not enough to be where we want or need to be to sustain such a big team. So yeah, obviously your biggest costs are your people, your tech, and your office space if you're in offices. So yeah, for us, it was a case of kind of unwinding that. And that's not something you don't just flick a switch and that happens overnight, right? So that was
it's
it.
difficult to get cost out quickly, isn't it? If you need to do it quickly, it's really difficult.
Yeah, it really is. So we were having conversations with basically the business that we were renting office space from, at tech providers, looking at the business, like who do we believe can operate in a more challenging market, a market which needs people to be able to go out and win business. And then when you're in a more kind of job-rich market and a bit of a crazy market, that skill isn't needed. And even if you have it, it isn't used as much. So even if you had that before, you kind of need to sharpen your spear and kind of refine that skill.
Yeah.
So that was a big challenge. And I think I know certainly from now we've had a bit of time since then, but there's these little moments in time that you look back on, or even at the time you just feel like it's going to be kind of pivotal in the journey that you're on. And we had a senior leadership offsite in summer 23.
Right.
We went to some place in North London for a couple of days. A few of the guys the leaders from the US flew over. We were in a room for a couple of days, and we were just figuring out how we want to operate a business. And we come out of it with the mindset of change and transformation. By this point, obviously, we'd kind of reduced headcount. We'd moved offices. Still had our own space. It was still the same company, but we knew. Fundamentally, we still had, like, when we came out of COVID and we did okay in 2020, we still have a great brand. We've still got great clients, great people, a really, really strong senior leadership team, but we need more structure.
Yeah.
I think you probably know, like, we've always, like I said earlier, been very client and customer led, and that's been, in hindsight, to the detriment of how we use systems, how we capture data, and how we build kind of rigid processes around how we do what we do, really. So for us, it was a transformation. And we come out of that at the beginning of building a new target operating model, basically. So what we called the Orbis Way. And we've been on that journey since then. So what are we? We're now 19 or 20 months since that point. We've made a ton of progress. And as as we ended last year and come into this year, we've started to see that reflected in performance as well. So the long winter finally seems to be abating. And the thing that feels good from my perspective is, regardless of what happens with the market, I know that we're a better business.
Yes.
If the market doesn't change at all, I'm pretty confident that we'll take more market share from what's there, just because of the way that we've changed the business and the way that we operate. Fundamentally, it's still the same. The values are the same. The focus on kind of client customer experience is still the same. It's just wrapping a process around it.
Now that's a great thing, Craig, because you've scaled a business. You've opened in new offices. You got to 100 people, whatever the number is. Then the market's changed, dynamics have changed, but now you can scale again, but with that process in place, that foundation, so you can do it. Yeah,
100%. Like when we've come out of that process, like we had a pre-COVID, I think what was the timeline at that point? We were partway through the 4-year plan at that point in terms of where we wanted to get the business to. we've now refactored that plan as of the end of last year, and this is year one, if you like. Hopefully we're at the beginning of some form of recovery and a slightly better economic cycle, but we shall see. And we're going to get to the same number, but with significantly less people. And that isn't just relying on tech. That's relying on, well, not relying on, but that's making sure that we've got the right structures set up to get a high level of performance per person, per head. And the great thing about that is it means that each of those, as an average, all those people are going to be doing more, which means it's going to have a bigger impact on their life. So, well, I don't feel like, and I still don't feel like we got obsessed with like the headcount numbers. But if I'm being honest with myself, it did feel like a bit of an achievement every time you go 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Obviously, 100 is quite a big number, but it doesn't really mean much if you're doing it to the detriment of the performance, like your average performance per head. That's what we're kind of obsessed with now. And
that's such an important figure, because for people watching this podcast, some of them will be leading a team of 5, and they'll be thinking, oh, if only I can get to 20 or 30 or whatever the number is. Well, actually, if they're focusing on performance per head, that becomes a much more relevant number.
Yeah, I think so. So that's what we're getting obsessed with, and have been.
Good. What's as the business has grown, leadership naturally moves away from the front line.
Yeah.
So how are you at Orbis and your team developing future leaders within the team? And the phrase that so few leaders have used in recruitment, in my experience, succession planning. What does that look like at Orbis?
By frontline, you mean on the sales?
At the beginning, you're the leader of the business. You're running it. You're probably checking CVs. You're doing all the things you need to do. Still with customers, still with your staff. But then gradually, when you're the CEO of a 50-person business, you've got to have other leaders coming up and through the business. How does that look at Orbis?
I think I mentioned action earlier, but it starts from leading by example, right? I think you said, how do you inspire? I think the best way to inspire someone is through action. And leading by example, whether that's behaviours or anything really. So when there's an opportunity to do that, I still get involved in doing that. I think from a future leader's perspective, it's a bit more difficult, I think. Obviously, we've all seen big billers that get encouraged into leadership, and for whatever reason,
it doesn't work.
They might not have, exactly. They might not have the skill set. They might not have they might not be given the right sort of framework to be successful, whatever it is. So I don't think it's a given, obviously. But you need some clarity and consistency in the how. Everyone's obviously got their own style, but I mentioned mindset earlier. Like it's kind of a given. You need people to turn up with the right mindset. I think your mindset has to adjust a little bit when you're going to start taking responsibility for leading people. Maybe a bit more empathy than maybe you might have shown otherwise. But then like the mindset bit, then you've got the data set bit, which is ultimately the Orbis Way. So how does that target operating model drop down to how we develop future leaders? And that's kind of like a non-negotiable. This is the way we do it. This is how we build success. And then there's a skill set bit, and that's where they put their own stamp on it. They put their own kind of personality on it. And you'd like to think that if you've got a cohort of those coming through, they can kind of use little bits that they like of their own personalities to try and use that in a positive way in their own teams.
Yes.
So what was that? So 23 was when we had the offsite. 2024, we committed to doing an SLT, a senior leadership team training program with an external partner called West Peak. It's a little plug for them. And they delivered a great program, right? But it wouldn't mean anything if we didn't turn up and commit to the program and not just be there in the room when it was happening, but want to take those learns and embed them into the business. So that started in September. Obviously nearly 6 months. So, and we've been embedding some of those learns into the business, which has already shown a positive impact. And the reason that's relevant is because off the back of that, from a future leaders perspective, we've just made a commitment to a future leaders program to follow on from that. So I've just announced it with the team, partnering with the same firm. But the difference with this one is it's like a dual delivery approach. So in essence, like train the trainer. So the SLT will be delivering a lot of the content with oversight from the training company, so that we can make sure that skill stays within the business. Ultimately, like our own leaders coaching the future leaders of our business. So that starts in May, I think, or June. And it's quite cool because unlike the SLT program, we ask people to apply for it.
Okay. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So like we had a set of questions, and yeah, people answer those, and depending on where we feel they might be on their journey, we'll have an honest conversation with them as to whether we think that this is the right time for them, or maybe whether they come on to the next one. So yeah, that is really going to be fundamental for the next phase of growth. It's definitely been a gap for us. So like that senior leadership team that I spoke about that were there in summer 23, the majority of those were there in 2020, 21. So they've
been on that same journey.
Yeah, we've been on that journey. So we've made some bad decisions together, individually, collectively, but we've made a lot more good ones, fortunately. And it kind of feels like a really unified team, and we now need to drop that down. So the gap for us is there's just not enough people at that level. So it's about identifying who we can bring up, and trying to do it in a way which doesn't kind of overwhelm them or compromise their ability to carry on building. That's always the balance, right, in this game. Like trying to build a 2, 3, 4 person team and maintain your billings. It's difficult. It's a different skill set.
But it's good you've got the SLT involved, because that's really good for culture, what we were talking about earlier. The culture of the organisation then seeps into everybody, both from leadership and performance.
In terms of them delivering it, you mean?
Yeah.
I hope so. Like everyone's engaging up for it, and we all believe it's the right thing to do. It's a collective decision. So I'm looking forward to it. What was the other question? Succession planning.
Yes.
So we've done a little bit of a tweak to our structure. So we've now got global heads in place for each of our functions. So contract perm and client solutions, which is a division that we set up 2 years ago. Pure client facing, not just about client acquisition or even client development, although that's a big part of it. It's about how the business and the group as a whole engages with customers and how we optimize the value of that partnership. So across those different service lines that we've got, like the recruitment, the consulting, the search, if we're dealing with senior stakeholders and we've got good relationships, there's no reason why they wouldn't buy those services from one place, essentially, much like a lot of our clients do. So that change in part is, again, I guess it comes back to the whole clarity and roles and responsibilities thing. That then should empower those decisions, like we were talking about a minute ago. But also we want to make sure that that group of people is challenging each other on those decisions, right? Like it's not like every decision you have to come to the table and say, oh, look, I'm thinking this, can I do it? But the significant things, we want to be in a room and we want people challenging each other. I say hopefully, because they're probably doing it right. But if you're not disagreeing at times, then you're probably not being honest. So I think a little bit of healthy conflict is a good thing as well, right? Let's challenge ourselves. And ultimately, it all comes back to the shared goal. And myself and Wayne, my business partner, and Alex, who went over to set up and runs the US, have basically kind of got out of the way a little bit. And what I mean by that is we've got a really capable SLT, capable board. We don't need to be involved in absolutely every decision. We're there to kind of set that vision and support it. But with a clear plan, clear responsibilities, you don't need us kind of getting in the way. And you kind of feel yourself doing it at times. So we're still very much in in the business. It's definitely not a play to create any kind of lifestyle thing or anything like that. But what it does do, interestingly, I can't remember exactly how you worded the question, but like the front line, did you say?
Yeah.
What it does do is it enables each of us three to spend more time back on the front line, but in the right place, like not dropping down at desk level, getting in the way, but actually getting out there externally, meeting with potential clients, new ones, existing clients. And that's something that the three of us have always enjoyed. I've built some great relationships over the years, and I think it's interesting in the role of a leader and maybe a CEO. Maybe I wouldn't say it's gone full circle, but it's something that I think is there's value in as well, in terms of being out there on the coalface, I guess, going out there and maybe inspiring, a bit like what we were saying a minute ago. Like, we've been doing this a long time. It's something that we enjoy. We feel we're pretty good at it. Some of the stuff that we're pitching and we're selling to clients is quite complex. Some of the solutions that we sell, particularly within the consultancy business. So being able to build a level of relationship whereby you can engage in that sort of conversation and actually convert a deal is not easy. So what I love about that is it kind of brings us all the way 360 and brings us back to the roots of what we're all about and what our fundamentals are and what our values are, which is like that highly engaged partnership, high quality engagement with clients, and making sure that kind of transcends through the business.
And I think, Craig, you're so right, because there's nothing more inspiring to newer people coming in, especially a lot of people still joining recruitment for the first time, newer people coming into recruitment, seeing the leaders still able to do it. Engage with conversations, build relationship with clients, close business. Yeah. If I'm joining a company as a newbie, it's like, okay, that's something I can aspire to. That's a great thing.
Yeah, I think so. And it kind of comes back to, like, it's just the experience, like how are we making people feel? Because ultimately, if you make someone feel as though they feel comfortable, maybe not always the best word, but if they feel like they can trust you, if they're willing to put impact, like the people that you're talking to, everyone's got their own objectives, right? And everyone's being measured on their success, and everybody gets rewarded off the back of it. So understanding somebody's problem and helping them with a solution, and then feeling comfortable to make that commitment to you is quite a big thing. And I think that transcends to every part of life, really. Like,
we've had once on this series of podcasts the Maya Angelou quote of along the lines of, people will often forget what you say, but they'll never forget how you make them feel.
There you go.
And it's such a lovely quote, but it's so true, because it's a people business. We're placing people, but in order to place people, we've got to inspire and encourage the people that work for us. Yeah,
exactly. I like that quote. I might add that to my list.
Maya Angelou. You can do that. Add it to the All Blacks. The legacy.
I will do. Yeah.
So I got one final question, Craig. Thank you. One final question. If you could go back to your first leadership role, wherever that was, pre-Orbis even, what advice would you give yourself about leading a recruitment business? A little pearl of wisdom for those listening to us now thinking, what do I do next?
Yeah, do you know, like even talking to you here, like I'm not naturally a reflective person. I'm quite aware of that. I've become more aware of it, and I've spoken quite openly with the team about it. So it's not always easy for me to think back, because I'm always looking forward. What's the next thing, the next thing? But I don't know. I feel like it even kind of predates work. Like I've always enjoyed leading from as long as I can remember. It's a bit like from when you're at school, when you've got sports teams and whatever. I've always felt comfortable with that responsibility. And I'm the sort of person that, even if I'm going to tell myself I'm just going to take it easy, like I'm going for like a casual run maybe, or it's just a friendly football match, or the deal doesn't really mean that much. As soon as the whistle goes, or the
friendly football match,
I'm full. Yeah, I'm like, it's not like win at all cost mindset, but I'm all in. So I think like I've taken on leadership responsibility at a fairly young age. When I got into recruitment in 21, by 23, I was leading a sales team in London. A couple of years later, at 25, I think I went over to Hong Kong to build out an APAC team for another business. And then came back to London to set up Orbis at 27. So I absolutely hadn't learned everything by then. And I think one of the reflections would be to maybe invest some more time in learning from other people. I definitely don't feel like a know-it-all by any means, but I'm very happy to go and figure something out and get something done. So I think sometimes that can be to the detriment of asking for help, maybe, and discussing ideas. I think I feel like it's become a bit easier as I've got older, but maybe just because you learn, right, experiences. But I think having some kind of peer group is super helpful. It's like sometimes it's helpful just to sit across the table from someone, look in their eyes, and them say back to you the same challenges that you're each having. Because most of the time, like 90% of the time, the same challenges are happening in most places, right? It's just how you deal with them. Maybe be a bit more, from a personal perspective, be a bit more reflective. Like maybe try and capture your values at an earlier stage and build out or capture a process and a structure that you think works, that you think is scalable. A bit like reference to what you're talking about a minute ago. Whether you're 5 people or 50 people, if you're 50, you're probably getting a bit closer to it being a bit more difficult. But make sure you've got that structure and that process in place of how you develop people and how we call it in and up, like how you get someone in and how you get them up.
Yeah.
And being consistent with it. If you tick those boxes, then I think you're doing well. And then ultimately it comes down to the commitment bit, which people, if they're deciding to do this, probably aren't lacking that commitment. So, before you go kind of all guns blazing, maybe just take a minute to reflect, make sure you've got that right support structure, and then, go for it.
Great. That's a lovely way to end a podcast because, so many recruitment companies are sub 10 people.
Yeah. I can't remember what the stats are, but it's a lot, right?
It's about 80%. And I think it's that bit of getting over 10 and then suddenly 20. I think, like you said earlier, a lot of leaders are now looking at profit per head, or looking at rather than just the number.
Yeah.
But on this podcast, we've got a number of leaders who are running very big companies, but also most are running small scale-up companies that are looking to get to the next level, whatever that can be. So, Craig, it's been great. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And we look forward to seeing you all on the next Recruitment Leaders Unlocked podcast. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.